ECW was just it was so much fun. It was
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah, I kind of really attribute it to kind of like what punk rock was to wrestling.
Mm.
We were the first ones to really do it that way. And a lot of people are still, you know what I mean, they're doing the garbage hardcore matches now. But we just, I don't know, we did it right. I was really happy with that stuff.
Oh, welcome again to another episode of Wrestling Wednesdays. I'm very excited because one of my heroes is this week's guest. You might know him as the Portuguese God of War. You might know him as Aldo Montoya. You might know him as Just Incredible. He's not just the coolest. He's not just the best. He is just incredible. PJ Polaco. PJ, great to have you. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me, man. Fantastic. Can't wait to talk to you.
Yeah, honestly, genuine pleasure. It's as I just mentioned to you, I was a massive fan of yours from being involved in the old Loveland, the comic book WWE days when you started off, and seeing what I did, and then getting to follow your career mainly through tapes and Power Slam magazine. But yeah, we'll delve into that. It's a real honor to get to hear your insight today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Obviously, before we get into your career, I was quite curious, as I know you've done quite a lot of podcasts, sort of reviewing AEW and the current market. How much of the current product in WWE or AEW do you watch at the moment?
I've Vince Russo approached me with the AEW review show. It's for his network. So we have literally done for I guess last week was the 200th episode of Dynamite. So we've done 200 episodes on AEW. So I've watched every single AEW Dynamite. I do like to watch Collision when I'm not working. And the WWE, I really don't watch much at all. I don't think I've watched a full show in years. But I watch the pay-per-views or they call them now, the Premier Live events. So I do watch those.
And do you notice the sort of the impact that you and your fellow ECW colleagues have had on the current product? You can, as a fan, you feel like it's the case.
In some ways, yes. In some ways, I mean, for sure. Like a lot of the ladders and tables and all that stuff. I mean, that was, I mean, that we weren't the first to do it, but ECW kind of brought that out in the forefront in the '90s. Barbed wire, because Japan was doing it. A promotion called FMW. They were the ones doing it, and Heyman really thought, like, how do we differentiate ourselves? Because at the time, both WWF and WCW were, it was not the Attitude Era yet. So really, if you wanted to have something different, something like just a traditional professional wrestling kind of thing, there wasn't really anything. A lot of it was cartoon characters. So Heyman went with something completely different and something new as well. And obviously, it worked. I mean, it helped Vince move to the Attitude Era, which he took a lot of, kind of inspired by ECW as well as WCW, and I still see some today. Although the kids are now, a lot of the AEW style, especially the stuff you see on Dynamite, is they think they say it's Japanese wrestling oriented, but I'm not a huge fan of what I see. Unfortunately, not that some of it is not good, but it's just so the strikes are so fast. Nobody sells anything. And to me, the more you do doesn't necessarily make it better. How many times you flip, although impressive, doesn't, what sells a story is the heart of it. You could watch a good movie, a good action movie, and it doesn't. The bigger stunts don't always mean at the end, you're going to get a good feeling about it. Like Rocky. The Rocky movies were always full of heart. It wasn't always about the boxing. And I think these kids today are just worried about how many moves can we get in, not the selling of the story itself. Except, one thing I've seen, and like I said, I didn't see a lot of it, but what I see online of the Roman Reigns story is a bit reminder of how, a pro wrestling story can be told in the ring.
Yeah, and I think that's what obviously guys around my age group, the reason we're still fans is because we were hooked at those moments in the 90s or the noise, whatever it might be, or even the late 80s, where you got so engrossed in a feud or a story or a character and it really mattered. And so that's why it's the perfect storytelling and escapism. Obviously you mentioned Paul Heyman a couple of times there. There's obviously we'll get to it, but I was quite curious about two of the people you worked very closely with. Have got sort of high roles, one in WWE and one in AEW, with Don Callis, who obviously you
Yeah.
had the fun of working with as Cyrus in ECW, and Paul Heyman. I wondered if I could ask you about both of them and what you think about their current places. I mean,
I mean, Paul is just he was always phenomenal. Even when he was just Paulie Dangerously managing in WCW, I thought he was always very good, great talker, great heel manager. Also very talented in the production meeting and the writing and the booking. But yeah, he's just his role now with Brock, although at times it's just really to stand there, just his presence and just the way he just how we can make people angry with just the way he looks, and just he's great. He knows how to do it. He does it probably as good as anybody. And Don, of course, the same thing. I mean, he's just such a that's Don Callis. That's who he really is, though. He's not. I mean, he's certainly not as mean, but boy, he bust your balls, and he's very much that character outside the ring, and he's a great guy too. Both are good guys. But yeah, those guys are doing just a fantastic job.
really works. Okay, so we'll start off obviously looking back. I mainly want to speak about ECW because I think it was just a phenomenal run that you had
Sure.
there. But I just want to ask you a couple of questions about your time in WWE and starting off in the 90s there with Aldo Montoya, the Portuguese Man of War. It feels like a kind of a name and a character that would settle so well right now. It would be something that could be such a well-known character. It's almost like we need the comeback, so you need to come back in for a period of time. What was it like when you started off and you jumped into working with guys like Jeff Jarrett and Jerry the King Lawler? How was that period of time for you?
I mean, it was really fun. Although the character, a lot of people thought it was a little cartoonish at the time. When they gave me very similar to the Steve Austin story, where they give creative gives you. I signed in 1994, August of '94, and creative gives you a list of names. And at first Aldo was supposed to be a soccer player. A lot of people didn't know that. And I didn't like the name simply. I like Portuguese Man of War. Vince very much wanted to use the Portuguese thing because business was down, and they were planning on going to both Brazil and Portugal. Brazil is a Portuguese-speaking country because we were doing a lot of touring. We were going over to England a lot,
Mhm.
going over to Germany and etc. And we were planning on expanding because business had kind of slowed down in America. So he had he had me. I was the Portuguese Man of War. Obviously, the British Bulldog, Davy Boy Smith, amongst others. He had some Mexican wrestlers, etc. He was always, if you remember the old WWF, going back to the old Vince Senior days. Pedro Morales, Spanish. That's why Savio Vega was Puerto Rican. One of the Puerto Rican guy. But anyways, Pedro Morales. Bruno Sammartino was the Italian, because those are the kind of people, those Italian people would be, proud and go out and support Ivan Putski, Polish power. There was a lot of that ethnicity going on in New York City. So he always believed in that marketing strategy. And that's, I think, where the Portuguese Man of War came from, that kind of name thing.
Yeah, it's really cool. I like the fact that it's a viewpoint of not just tapping into the viewers at home, but thinking about the market and where you are and what's going on culturally at the time. And
Right.
New York and where WWE's based, it's such a multicultural big city, so you can kind of
Very much.
have a
Yes.
lot of fun
Yep.
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you jumped. Obviously, I think from reading up and hearing about you in the past, obviously you trained in Canada, and I think WWE was the sort of big first company you signed with.
Yeah.
You had a sort of a fun feud with I think it was with Jeff Jarrett and then Road Dogg on a pay per views and kind of matches. I wondered if you could sort of how did that feel working with those guys, and what were the matches like for you?
It was, just Aldo. He'd won a little bit on TV. He'd have his Saturday morning squash wins, quite a few of them. So I was being featured in that way, and then we did me and Jeff Jarrett in a non-title match for the Intercontinental title, and go on. We have a good match, and I don't remember what the finish was, but I remember I beat Jeff in the non-title match, which then would allow me to, do promos the next week, and then the third week actually get a chance for the Intercontinental title, which was really cool. And then, obviously I didn't get the big win, but again, it was just to be doing those matches on TV and almost winning the IC title. Really wish I would have had an opportunity to. That would have been so dope, but it didn't happen. But still, working with a guy like Jeff with so much experience, he was so good, and Road Dog, it was just brilliant, very cool.
And obviously, you mentioned British Bulldog and the fact that you were touring all over the place. Have you got any memories of touring around the UK and any funny stories you could share with us?
God, just I loved going to the UK. That was probably one of my favorite places to go. I've been there many times. Wrestled, I never wrestled the new what is it, the O2?
Yeah.
I forgot what it was. I think it was Wembley, but the not Wembley Stadium. It was like Wembley Arena. I don't know. It might have been. We wrestled in Royal
All
Albert
places like that.
once in '95, which was super cool. But yeah, I loved going to England. And I remember one funny story, but it had nothing to do with in the ring. It was when Davy Boy and I were drinking with referee Mike Chioda, and he passed out at the bar. And Davy Boy goes and grabs his, hair clippers, and he shaved his head completely bald while in the bar. All the fans were watching. So, that was really funny. Mike was not too happy because he was very vain and like, always fixing his hair and shit. But I remember going back to London like 6 months later, and the fans that were there at the bar actually gave us pictures because we didn't have cell phones yet at the time. So they, as we're coming in and we're meeting the fans, like they're handing us pictures of Davey and I, like, I'm holding Kyoto's head. Davey's like with the clippers, and because we like denied it the whole time, right? And now here the fans are with like living proof of what's actually going. It was hilarious, fun stuff, man. Good times.
That's absolutely brilliant. I love that. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
uh,
And it just
Davey
brings you back, doesn't it, to the time when you had to
Davey
print
was
photos.
crazy. Yeah, Davey Boy was crazy.
Yeah, was it? In terms, obviously, I know, obviously, I know you've spoken about it on other interviews. Spent a lot of time with the other guys from the clique, etc. But it seemed like a really nice group of people that enjoyed just partying and finding that balance together.
Yeah, it was. And I know today it has changed quite a bit, and in some ways it's good, because these athletes, they don't party as much, they don't go drinking, and that's good that it's calmed down. But that being said, what made us such a tight knit group and the locker room were, because that's like back in the old days, especially before my time, the territory days. A lot of the times you would build relationships and do business in the bars, having a drink, talking about how, you know what I mean? You got a couple flowing in you, you start really getting, your creative juices flowing, and you talk business. And that's how you became brothers and you trusted one another and ideas got formed. So it was really a social thing as well. And it's a shame that it doesn't happen that way anymore. And you could really tell because, things are just, there's just no, we had such a tight locker room, there was no, everybody was in line, everybody was cool. And today, like, there's fighting and there's heat with each other. And that would never happen back in the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a shame, but yeah, it was really fun back then, man. It's the last of the great era for sure.
Yeah, and I think as a fan, that's the sort of the moments more than when you think about in a match or going to an event or anything. I think it would be that you would love to have delved into the most, like just being in a car journey and hearing you guys
Right.
talk about how you would do things differently or using your creative mind, because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just the fun, and also having a drink with you guys because it's just that conversation that comes out. There's something
Right.
very unique
Absolutely.
that you don't get access to.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, that just doesn't exist, which is, again, it's a shame. It really is. Because you also, I think, by hanging out with guys, you get to really know them, and
Yeah.
you end up finding out about their families, or you know what I mean, just a whole different respect. I think today the locker rooms are so divided because of that. I don't think relationships are formed the way they used to be. Because I can go in the ring with any of those guys, even the biggest and the toughest, like the JBLs of the world, and you'd come out okay. Where today, I don't think people, a lot of times I just hear that these guys don't really fully trust one another, or one guy's stiff, the other guy's, there's all kinds of problems. So yeah, it's just we're just you just had a lot more respect because you hung out with these guys. You were, it's like we were going to war together. You know what I mean? We were, not to sound corny, but we were like a family. So yeah, it really helped.
And did you ever have the pleasure of Vince joining you ever on a night out on one of these tours? Like, I don't know, did he come out much in Europe?
No,
No.
no, he would very rarely go out. I only think I've heard of Vince coming out maybe once during the entire time I was there. But I don't even remember if that was the case. But I think it was before my time, actually.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I never experienced that, unfortunately.
No, he needs to let you guys enjoy yourselves probably and keep and obviously clearly let people's hair get shaved off and
Yeah,
that's that hair down.
absolutely. Right, because it would be a bit different if Vince was hanging around.
Very much so. It's a real shame, obviously, before we, when you came back into WWE after the purchase, obviously, I think you'd already joined, obviously, working with X-Pac before ECW was purchased, but I was always gutted that they never played on the whole Aldo Portuguese Man of War thing again to bring the European Championship your way. It's a real shame. It's one of my pet peeves that I always felt that they could have done something with that, but
I agree as well. I thought it was like, really, you're gonna have a guy who's from Portugal, which is obviously European, and you have the European title. The Portuguese flag is actually on the European title, by the
yeah.
way. And and it's a secondary title. You can't you can't give me a little run with it. So obviously not. But
No,
yeah,
yeah, it's a real
it's a
shame.
shame.
I thought it was one of the things they could have done that would have helped. It's one of my obviously
Oh,
being,
for sure.
it's one of my
Yeah,
favorite things that they did. So it was like, oh, come on, use it more,
yeah.
please.
They
But
really should have, because they have. That's the thing, when something like that starts, they usually have their heart in the right place.
Mhm.
But then they get so busy, I don't think they realize, and the writers don't realize how to really utilize it. You
Yeah.
know.
Do you think? Obviously, I don't know if it's ever, but do you reckon any of those sort of things are impacted by how the American market's doing? So if the American market's doing well, they're not as interested about the global, but when they need that kick up, they'll find a way to delve into that culturalism.
Yeah, I do, and that was really a direct. I think a lot of it was directed at that time because business was down in the states. It really had a lot to do with it because we found ourselves more and more going. Once we would go usually over to UK once a year, Germany as well, and we'd go to Zurich, Switzerland, and Austria, Vienna, all over the place. France, Italy, whatever, Portugal. And when um, business was down, I was saying we used to go once a year. Now we're going twice a year.
Mm.
You know what I mean? We're visiting these, places twice a year, which really showed that, I mean, I remember doing, Madison Square Garden only having 5,000 people there. More than half empty. So it was. Those were some lean times, right around the time of the steroid trial there. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. One last question before we go on to ECW. Any? Because I always love people hangovers in the morning. Who was the worst to wait to walk onto the coach with in the morning? Who was the ones to leave alone after the night out?
Oh God, it was probably X Pac. He was usually the last on the bus, and always had sunglasses on, and always looked a little worse for wear, if you will. Yeah, and Shawn Michaels at times too, but he always kept it more together than the kid did. That's for sure.
Brilliant. That's great to know. Thank you for that. Obviously, there was a big change for you moving into ECW. I've heard you talk about it and the options you had where you considering leaving to go to, you moved to developmental. ECW obviously seemed to sort of change your whole career around. And I think it's the thing that most fans, including myself, really resonate with you or really remember from your career the most is the several years you had as a sort of one of the top stars in the company. What was it like when you first walked through the door at the company, and what was it like? How was people reacting to you?
I was nervous. Just didn't know what to expect, quite frankly, and realized quickly, and I didn't know how the fans were going to take me because there's notoriously rough fans, especially with a character like Aldo Montoya. You know what I mean? But that being said, it never was too bad. They took to me. I think the first match I had at the famous ECW arena was, and also versus the debuting Jerry Lynn. So I think they were a bit apprehensive at first, but when they realize, oh wow, this kid can really go. This kid has all the ability. And you know what I mean. After that, it became easier and easier, and you started to get over. And it's when they want you to get over, they put you in the position to succeed, and they certainly did. I mean, working with Mikey Whipwreck, I think that was I'm sure that was my first program in ECW, and then also Jerry Lynn. That was my second program, and went right away to Tommy Dreamer, one of the icons of ECW. Obviously very important. So, again, you're after that, you're kind of okay as far as in the fans' eyes, and it just kept getting bigger and better, and things started getting better for me as far as I won my first tag team titles with Lance Storm, the Impact Players. We had it twice, I believe, but things just kept escalating, just getting bigger and bigger, and then also WCW had tried to get some of our guys to go over there. So by just because I was making good money in ECW, believe it or not, and more than I was making for WWE as Aldo, if you could believe that. So for me, I never wanted to go to WCW, even though I was under contract. I never had that opportunity for the most part, but I loved it in ECW, and I thought what we were doing was super cool.
Yeah. It seemed a very natural growth for you as well. Did it just feel quite quick
It did.
that it was your home and it was the right place for you?
Yes, at the time especially, because there was so much going on, and I'd noticed too that guys that were going to WCW, although the money was great, you know, they never really hit a home run. They had Raven go back, and then he ended up returning. He did okay for a minute there, but never really did much with the storylines. Same thing with Sandman. He went there as hardcore hack, which was terrible. They tried and they never really succeeded with any of the ECW guys. So it was almost, it was a sign to like, this is where you are for a while, and as you know, I stayed there till the absolute end, and I think that was the right thing to do, really do.
Yeah. I want to obviously ask you about the very big moment with Tommy Dreamer, but we'll get to that in a second. Before we do, obviously you mentioned it already about the tag teaming with Lance Storm, Impact Players. That has seemed to really take over. I believe, obviously, from listening to you, that you and Lance have always been quite close, and obviously you were a fantastic
Yeah.
tag team.
Yeah.
What was that? What was that like getting to work with Lance, and obviously the success of having 2 runs as tag team champions and working as bad guys and good guys? Fans just loved you.
Yeah, it was such a natural fit because, as you know, I was trained by the Hart brothers in Calgary, and Lance was the primary trainer of that school. So he made me feel very comfortable. We were very close. And the best thing that I think made it so much fun and made it so good was simply that I was what he was not, which was I had a little bit more attitude, a bit more of a heelish, outspoken character, had the kendo stick, etc. And then Lance was more of and then he, I had the character, and he was the technician. He was more, you know what I mean, more of a like a silent assassin. So we both just complemented each other nicely. I did some things better than he did, and he did things better than I did. But when you put it together, it makes for a very good, you know what I mean, a very good team, which was the whole point of tag team wrestling, was to kind of complement one another, instead of being too similar to one another.
Yeah. And did you guys want to tag team, or was that something that Paul Heyman decided?
It was something that Paul decided. I really didn't have my ideas were certainly welcome, but man, I never pitched a lot of ideas because I didn't have to. Paul's stuff was he always had something for me, and that's the one thing about ECW was, we were competing with 2 big companies, and talent wise as well. People were always coming and going. So Paul had to make sure that the guys he had there were always being booked properly, you know what I mean, and taken care of. So I really was never worried. I would just, have Paul tell me what we're doing, fully believe in him and the guys I was working with, and yeah, and he never failed me too. Like, I never had a period of time where I didn't have something cool going on in the storyline. So that was easy. So I just kept my mouth shut and just kept going out there and doing the best I could.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite memories of working as a tag team that you could share? Any matches that you're particularly really
Yes,
proud of?
I certainly have one, and it was very very good. And we had a huge reaction. Was I don't know if you remember this. It was just a television match. We were not tag team champions at the time, but it was against Gato and Jado from FMW. I think Jado, one of them is booking for New Japan right now, or has been during the Bullet Club era. So they were a very famous tag team at the time for FMW. And I remember having like this amazing television match where the crowd just went absolutely ballistic. It was one of the loudest reactions we'd ever gotten as a tag team. That one sticks out in my head. If you can go on YouTube, you'll probably find it. But yeah, just an unbelievable tag team match.
Yeah, sounds really good. I'll check that out. I don't think I've seen that one
Yeah,
yet.
check it out.
I'll check it out.
You won't regret it. That was a good
Yeah,
one.
brilliant. I look forward to it. You obviously had a great connection with Dawn Marie as part of obviously the Impact players and obviously the team grew. It seemed to be ECW were very good at creating female characters that could also be competitive or involved in a different way to the way WWE and WCW booked their female talent. Did you notice that yourself when you were in there at the time? Did it feel like the females had a different attitude and they wanted to get involved more?
I don't know if they wanted to get involved. I'm sure some of them did. I know Francine certainly did, but it was just what the way Paul used them as characters. And it was very traditional role of I wouldn't even say traditional, but a very much of a Memphis style thing. And I'll explain why I say Memphis. I was watching an old match, just happened to come on YouTube or TikTok or something like that, and it was Jerry Lawler um, getting beat up or whatever, but finally he gets his revenge after the match, and the heel lady manager gets a pile driver from Jerry Lawler, and they pop huge, like one of the biggest pops I've heard, at the big arena they did in Memphis there. And that's where the heel manager, you could count on Tommy Dreamer DDTing them or pile driving them or something like that, where they could be nasty and mean and they could cheat, but you know what I mean, you get the big pop when you could give them when it bites them in the ass and you give them a move and they lay them out. The fans love that shit. Not that it was not about violence on women. It was just, they would always be there to cheat and help you lose. And it's finally like, you get your revenge, and the fans just ate that shit up. And then, of course, the infamous cat fight when you had a babyface manager and a heel manager. You know what I mean? It was always, Paul knew how to make moments like that, both in the house shows and on pay per views and television. You would always be guaranteed a cat fight on a pay per view, some girl getting pile driven. You know what I mean? Just some kind of stuff like that. But and some sexy promos, of course. So a lot of fun, man.
Yeah. Um, I'll ask you about a few of the characters afterwards, but obviously one of the most famous nights of yours was becoming ECW World Heavyweight Champion and defeating one of ECW's homegrown and long-time legends, Tommy Dreamer. How was that sort of built for you? Because obviously that was a huge turning point with Francine turning heel on him, and obviously then you becoming the champion. How was that? How early did you know that was going to be built, and when did that sort of storyline behind the scenes start being created?
I do not know when it was created. All I know was I was told at intermission that night that's what I was doing. Believe it or not, I had no idea. I wasn't on the show, and but Paul had mentioned for me and Lance to get dressed. I don't even know if Lance was there. He just told me to get dressed, and I'm like, okay, because the original match was Taz versus Dreamer. This is when Taz had beaten Mike Awesome. Taz was already in the WWE at the time. He came back to do this with Mike Awesome, who was leaving for WCW. They had to get the belt off of him. So yeah, I literally found out that I was getting the belt at intermission. You know, which is wild. But again, it doesn't hurt Dreamer, right? Because he beats Taz, right? The WWE superstar. He finally climbs the mountain and becomes the ECW World Champion. And of course, I'm the spoiler. He's not even, he's already beat up, went through hell. And then Franny turns on him. I hit him with my finish. There I am. I mean, that's what I was. I was a perfect spoiler for Tommy Dreamer, you know.
That's brilliant. I mean, how did it feel for you when you found that out then?
Oh,
Were you able
it
to
was
process that?
awesome. I was so happy. Not because I'm actually winning something. I mean, it's fake. We all know it's fake. But being said, to have the title put on me, especially the big one, the World's Heavyweight Championship. There's only three promotions in America, and there's only three championships. I'm one of them. Right there, that raises my stake huge in the business. A and two, it made me feel like, hey, Paul really trusts me. Paul Heyman, the great Paul Heyman, trusts me enough, right, to put the world heavyweight title on me and have me main event his shows. Meant the world to me. It meant that he felt I could do it. Meant he felt I could draw, and me as champion. I mean, we did some sellouts on pay per view, man. I remember the three matches I main evented on pay per view. We sold out all of them. I don't know what the pay per view numbers are, but I remember we sold out in LA. Well over 6,500 fans at the old Grand Olympic Auditorium, which is where Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens back in the day would wrestle. Very famous arena, and we sold out. Me and Jerry Lynn in Jerry Lynn's hometown at Anarchy Rules 2000, where Jerry won the belt. And we sold out another one too, and I don't remember exactly who it was against. I think it might have been me and Sid. I don't know, me and Sid. Sold out Poughkeepsie though, Poughkeepsie, New York. So yeah, I mean, we did good business. So I was very, very proud of that run as the champion.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the night obviously you became champion. Do you have many memories of the match itself, or was it a bit of a blur?
It's all a blur now. It's a long time ago, right? And I mean, I certainly remember, the reactions and how I feel about it. But I don't like to go back and watch because I have such positive memories. I know if I go back and watch, I'll certainly see some holes in my work that I'll be like, "Damn it, that looked like," you know what I mean? I'm happy with the memories, because the memories feel good, and you know, maybe it's in my mind it's better than it really is. I'll take the memories. So.
Yeah. Where do you think Tommy Dreamer and Francine sit in terms of the history of wrestling? Obviously, in ECW, very, very important characters. Do you think they're sort of overlooked in the grand scheme of things?
I think there's certainly a group of wrestlers that do get overlooked quite a bit. I don't. He does at times, um, and Francine does as well get overlooked. But yeah, I think Tommy Dreamer, though, for the most part, um, gets a little bit of an unfair shake. But he still gets, he's still Mr. ECW for the most part. But like it seems like Sabu and RVD are always the ones associated with ECW. So it is what it is.
Really excited to share the news that Wrestling Wednesdays has been nominated and shortlisted for the Best Wrestling Podcast Award at this year's Sport Podcast Awards. Now, it's a complete and utter honor to be nominated. It's amazing to be up alongside some incredible podcasters, but we would love to try and win it. So, check out the links below and give us a vote. It would mean the world to us if we could stand any chance of winning this. Thank you.
I've got to obviously I'll continue the ECW. I'm just curious actually when you do any events where you're meeting fans, is ECW the majority of the stuff people ask you about?
Yeah, for the most part. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Just curious because I'm realizing I'm probably asking you a lot of ECW questions. That's all. So
No, that's okay. It's all good. It's all good.
You mentioned earlier about one of your earliest feuds in ECW was with Jerry Lynn. There's a kind of a nice synergy there where it seems to sort of maybe top and tail your time with ECW, where you were working with him in '98 and then obviously working with him again in 2000.
Yes.
What was it like working with him? Because you guys seem to match so well athletically in the ring.
Oh, it was just working with Jerry was just, he was so easy. He was just so good. He could work any style with anyone. So he was just, one of the best. Just I can't say enough good about him.
Yeah, and obviously the match you had, I think it was the event in '98 Heatwave. It's sort of
Yes.
seen as one of the most successful or the most entertaining of ECW's pay-per-views of all time. And you obviously have a massive match with it, 15 minutes long, very very quick pace. Obviously something that people have learned from for today's matches. But and obviously you mentioned earlier it was a bit of a blur for everything. But Do you remember what you were you're going into that thinking, what you're trying to achieve out of it, or were you just a case of you knew what the finish was and you'll talk it out there?
Yeah, we had a couple of big ideas, and really just went out there and did it. That's kind of how we always did. You never went out there with a plan on making anything, because we always wanted to make every match as good as it could be.
Yeah,
So yeah, we just kind of went out there and just did best as we could and what fans would want to see, where we were on the card and stuff like that for sure.
yeah, cool. Obviously, ECW is kind of known for having some very I think over time they feel like they were even more hardcore than they were. You know, obviously the Dudleys with the flaming tables and the barbed wire that we were talking about earlier. Were there any? I think obviously at the time it was a little bit shocking, but I think it's almost like in hearsay now, where it's oh my god, this was even worse than it was because it all fitted in quite well to what was going on. Were there
Right.
any things that Paul Heyman asked you to do that you were like, I don't really feel comfortable with that, or that's just a bit doesn't work for the story?
No, I think he kind of knew too what each one of us was willing to do. So no, nothing really that ever struck me as that he would want me to do that I wouldn't do. Nothing I felt uncomfortable with, but he never asked me to do anything crazy. He knew better.
He didn't want the kendo stick to his head. Basically, it was before he got in trouble. One of the other people you worked closely with when during time ECW was Nicole Bass.
Yeah.
Obviously, like I was saying a minute ago about there's certain people with, like I was saying, Tommy Dreamer and that, and you mentioned there's several people that probably from there and that time that don't really get the kudos. Probably is probably the best way to describe it from what they brought to the industry at the moment they're in it. What was it like working with her, and how did you think people reacted to her incredible presence that she had physically?
She was a sweetheart of a lady. I mean, she really was. She was a nice girl, and it's funny because although she was very big and muscular, she really her heart and her attitude behind the scenes was that of a young, small girl. She was very meek, very quiet. And people would make fun of her a lot, the fans, and at times she did break her heart because she just wanted to be one of the gals, and just wanted to be regular. And, she would always be called names, things you couldn't say today for sure, called her a man, and which obviously is not the case, she's very much a woman. But yeah, it was, but she was really cool, man. She was a really nice lady. I liked working with her. She was a pleasure.
That's really sad. Sorry to hear all that. I didn't know that had all gone on at the
What
time.
it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, it comes with the territory. That's why she was there.
Mm.
So
Yeah. It's certainly an industry where you are very open to what they call
sure.
nowadays trolling, isn't it? With obviously the
Yeah.
online version, but back then it was you
Sure.
in your face.
Yeah, and I mean, but that's what being a heel is, right? So it is what it is.
Yeah, but you were very overheal. Obviously, great promos, great t-shirts. The crowds loved you, but obviously got
Yes.
the right reactions when you wanted them to. I think that was the beauty of your time there. Um,
Yeah.
Before we leave the ECW conversation, it'd be remiss of me not to ask about one of the all-time greats, Terry Funk. Uh, uh, do you have any? Do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like spending time with Terry or working
Oh,
with Terry? Any thoughts on what a legend that he is?
and she was just, I got to work with Terry quite a bit, and just how amazing he was, how willing to help the younger guys he was. Just by being in the ring with them, was got me instant credibility. So that's one thing Paul Heyman did very well. He knew how to match you up with legends, and it was an honor. Terry taught me, just so much about how to work and how to improv and how to really just just be you. And Terry just was such a huge presence. And he led by example, and it was an honor. And I stayed friends with him. All throughout. Even now, I'll still shoot him a text once in a while, seeing how he's doing and how he's holding up. So
That's really nice to hear. What's he like backstage? And obviously, you say he's very open to talk to you. Is he just a very
yeah, he's just
approachable guy?
always watching the matches. It's amazing that I made the distinction one time. It was like the opening match, and we were upstairs. It was me, my wrestling a guy who wrestled for ECW, Tony DeVito, and Terry Funk, and it's like, we're the three watching the matches, and everybody else, all the younger guys are, jerking off or doing other things, or and it's like, it was just the kind of fan he was of the business. But you also want to watch because we're going on last, to do whatever we're doing. So you don't want to go out there and copy something or do something that's already been done. That's why I hate planning too much ahead of time, especially the later you are on the card. That's why I don't understand how people could put matches together, uh, verbatim. It's a really lost art to go out there and improv, and you should be able to do that at any professional level. And it's just really a lost art form, unfortunately.
Yeah. Do you, how often would you? It does feel very much like a case of the old school way of learning. Not to use the old school term, but the way of learning was obviously taking it in to listen to what the fan reactions were. You knew what you were
Right.
getting, but you try and do moments and soak it in at the right time.
Yep.
Um, your time in ECW when you're working on TV and you've got a set amount of time, what was that like, knowing that you were going to react to a crowd that could be very raucous?
It was, to me, it was even better, right? It was, the louder the better, the crazier the better, and the less hard we had to work, you know. So to me, it was just easier, and yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of the lifestyle outside, obviously with WWE, there's a lot of touring, and obviously, you know, as discussed, there's a lot of overseas requirements with working for WWE. With ECW, how often were you working a week?
3 nights a week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Cool. And did
Yeah.
that sort of turn into a bit of a social life for the weekend then, or did everyone sort of go there?
No, no, not really, not really, because I always, I traveled. My wife worked for the company. She was on the T-shirt, and she sold all the T-shirts at all the events. So she traveled to every show with me. So it was very much, go do the shows, get into the car, drive to the hotel, and the most we would do is go smoke a joint with Paul Lee or something like that. Seriously, just to relax or have something to eat. So I didn't get, especially when you're with your wife, didn't get into the party scene.
No, but that's nice. What a great way. Obviously, I heard a bit of that on the WWE documentary they made in the early noughties about different people working, having like two jobs with the company or partners coming in. I
Yeah.
think it's a really good touch.
It was, and not to mention she was making extra money, $150 a night. I was making $2,500 a week, so she would bring home an extra $400. So brought me up to almost $150,000 a year, which doesn't seem like the big money that WCW and WWE is making, but still, I'm doing it on my terms, and I'm close to home. I got to sleep home many nights because I live in Connecticut, which is an hour and a half from New York City. I'm an hour and a half, 2 hours from Boston, 3 hours, 4 hours from Philadelphia. All over. I'm accessible. And if I got to fly, it's quick flights, right? So it was never really very difficult. So much less difficult, much easier, let's say, than the WWE schedule, for sure.
Yeah, it can totally makes sense. And obviously, what I'd say, the creative freedom, and obviously working with
Oh
Heyman in a
yeah.
very iconic way, well worth it.
And still, that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
I don't, it's, I never needed to make a ton of money. I just needed to be happy. And I would trade that for a lot of, for a big contract, you know, because, it just made all the sense in the world. I was truly happy, unless it was that fuck you money where I don't ever have to work again, then that's one thing. But, that's never the case. So.
well, I say obviously I speak for a lot of fans, but we're very pleased you did your run in ECW. Um, Before obviously ECW was purchased, you were back with WWE
Yes.
and working with X-Pac. We have a reality TV show over here called The X Factor.
Yes. We
So
have it here too.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it's I think Simon Cowell probably owes you quite a lot of money because you guys had the gimmick first. But
Yeah.
obviously it was a shame it didn't last long enough. But yeah, how fond were you at the time working with a
Oh,
friend of
I
yours?
loved it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. I just, I think things would have been very different if the invasion did not happen. Because at that time, then things drastically changed. So, yeah, if WCW didn't go out of business, and if the invasion angle didn't happen, it would have been a huge difference. So, yeah, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do when that's what it is? And I was lucky to still have a job right? All these new wrestlers, we went from having 3 wrestling companies now to 1. I'm lucky to even be there, right? So, all these free agents, some people didn't get signed, some people didn't get jobs. So I was just happy to be there.
And before obviously that happened, when you went back to WWE, what sort of conversations were you having with them? Was it about the tag team division, or was there anything you were looking to achieve? You're just very easygoing.
Oh, yeah, I just did kind of what they wanted me to do. And again, it's not much really else you could say other than I'm on the team and do whatever you want me to do. You know,
Yeah. And how did the setup feel differently compared to when you left in sort of 96, 97? Sort of, did
it
it
it,
seem like a different company?
it really did. It really did. The days of all the madness was kind of was out the table. So it was very much it was becoming very just very different, very professional, not as crazy as it was. That's for sure.